Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of r/slash Tales from Tech Support. In today's episode, you can't take it with you. The time I killed an entire company. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. You can't take it with you. So, time for another tale at my former employer. I'm sorry I've been so long away. Life took a turn for the insane, but here is a story I promised all of you long ago while on the way to a series of disasters that resulted in another tale. I'm the company and faucet guy specializing in the dark arts. I earned the hat I wear. See my other stories here. One thing to note, the company's sales and marketing is run not out of the company HQ in Finland, but in another country. And the S&M people hate IT and hate me even more. The year is 2013, the place, company. I'm on my way into the office after a nice evening of sauna and board games with competent_coworker, all during which she seemed to have something she wanted to share with me, but couldn't. This isn't too strange, information flow is limited in the company, but she has access to everything and isn't allowed to share. I expect some interesting email during the day, but nothing. Over lunch, competent_coworker asks me if I've gotten anything in IT's ticket queue about user accounts, and I tell her I haven't. She bites her lip in frustration and nods. As the group we are with gets back to the office, she says she'll walk up the long way around the building instead of taking the shorter stairs, so I follow her. Once we are safely around the building from others, she pauses, debating what to say, then tells me that if I can monitor usage of marketing at $S accounts, that might be a good idea. I respond I certainly can, as privacy laws are less strict in the overseas office he is at, but to be safe I'll follow Finnish law and only track basic info like when and where the account is accessed from. That should be enough, and do it ASAP. Smiling, I thank her and head to my room. I quickly log into Exchange and put his account in litigation hold, and mirror it to a clean account for backup, then remove the hold. It should be around 4 a.m. where he lives, so the brief disruption should go undetected. Very brief, he has a few hundred MB of emails, and the Exchange server lived on a 8-drive SSD array. Next, I set up a rule to every 4 hours pull all the login attempts records for his account from our 3 domain controllers, and dump it to a file, and a similar one for Exchange, VPN, and our Radius Wi-Fi server. Finally, I enable success auditing for one DFS server in his local office, and adjust his profile to only talk to that single server, and set up the same dumps there. All of this takes a while, and I am done probably around 3 p.m. Now the hard part. Every morning, lunch, and evening competent_coworker is asking if anyone has told me or IT anything. Nope. This goes on until the middle of next week, per getting more and more frustrated, my logs collecting, but not seeming too strange, just normal usage during the day, no sent emails, but regularly checking sales leads and opening our offers for local customers, etc. Middle of next week we have a company lunch in the office, usually accompanied by whatever team wants to show off their work or management brainwashing, 40C, gentle cycle, air dry only. It's a management presentation from the CFO this week, oh joy. After 20 minutes and the food getting cold, they finally wrap up. In other news, we are sorry to say that 2 weeks ago marketing at $$ left the company, so a search is on for a new marketing director. My jaw just about hits the floor. I stand up, and I ask, just when were you going to inform IT? His accounts are still active, and he's had access now for a week and a half since leaving. The response, well, now you are informed, but we agreed to keep his accounts active for some time after he left so he could move his stuff. He'll also return his computer to the overseas office later. At this point everyone is looking at me. All my coworkers know I'm about to explode, but instead of the expected, I ask who made this decision, to which the CFO responds he is the one who made the agreement. I nod, turn my back on him, and start looking for my personal pizza to take back to my cave. As I walk past her, competent_coworker gives me a small nod, a smile, and whispers, now you know. It's time for action. I immediately disable all remote access to the company for marketing at $. set his laptop and company phone to auto-lock and require a passcode from IT to unlock, blacklist his SSL VPN connection, and curse Microsoft for the stupidity of not checking if a phone should be locked or wiped remotely as part of authentication to Exchange. So if I disabled his account, he wouldn't get far enough into his email on his phone to lock it. Strangely enough, I see several iPads listed on the account, as well as an Outlook version that didn't match his laptop's previous reports as I am printing out my logs. Finally, I Google marketing at $, and quickly find his LinkedIn page, where he is now sales director at our main competitor for one of our products in his country. I hit print on this too. I'm sure I've been swearing quite a lot, as when I open my door, every head in the nearby open office is turned and staring at me. I go to the printer, grab the few hundred pages on the top, and go to the CEO's office. I knocked but didn't bother waiting for an answer. The CEO was there coding and very annoyed at the interruption, but knows I must have a reason and asks what is going on. I ask if he knew the CFO had agreed with marketing at $, that he could keep access to the company system for a while. He said yes, and he was okay with that. Seems the guy has a lot of family pictures he needed to get off his laptop and wanted time to update his contacts to his personal email. I responded by throwing the printed LinkedIn profile on his desk, and I see him turn red quite rapidly in anger. After giving him a few seconds to process, I state, as a matter of company security, I've disabled his remote access, removed him from our sales leads mailing lists, and set his computer and company phone to auto-lock. In addition to what I control, he has added several iPads and some other Outlook mail client for email access. I can't block those without making it impossible to lock that computer and phone, so as soon as they are locked, I will disable the account completely. Here is a list of everything he has already accessed as far back as our system's logs go, and where he accessed it from. Good, do anything you can. With those orders, I went back to my room. Strangely, this competitor name sounded familiar from LinkedIn. I don't look at our competition much. I logged into my account and discovered I had a connection in their IT security department who had gone to school with me. Looking at the data from Outlook's logs on the Exchange server, I saw I was getting a great deal of info from inside their company, including the fact machines were named by building, floor, and switch port. Very nice. I thought about it, then decided what to do. I waited until I saw the first Outlook login of the day from his machine, then I called up the company. After a bit of social engineering, I got to the IT/security department, and while the person I had gone to school with wasn't there, I sure as hell got their attention. Hello, my name is Kel_Naranek with %company in Finland. I'm sorry to call you about this, but my company had a security breach we traced to your network. I suspect that a former employee of ours, marketing at $, who now works for you, had just brought a personal iPad into your office, as well as having set up one of your machines to connect to our company. I show he just signed in a few minutes ago. He probably got into your building about 15 minutes ago, and is working on floor X, connected to switch port Y, according to the information your systems are sending into my company. I would appreciate if you could please put an end to this before my company has to look into taking action against yours. Thank you. We'll get right on that. Click. The next day I checked LinkedIn, and he was no longer listed as working for our competitor, and I disabled his account completely. The time I killed an entire company. Okay, it wasn't entirely me, nor really my fault, but the result ended up being the company going into bankruptcy and closing shortly thereafter. And all because of a tiny little bug. No, not like the bugs in my last story, instead the more traditional software bug. As a caveat, this happened nearly 25 years ago. Details may not be 100% accurate, but it'll be close enough. At the time I worked at a company that supplied IT support for small businesses, usually very small, 25-ish employees or less. One of our customers had a software suite that did accounting, inventory management, and invoice handling. An invoice came in, was manually entered, and the program did its thing, sending existing product down to shipping, telling the workers what needed manufacturing, and printing shipping labels to get the finished product where it needed to go. Tracking the invoice from step to step as it was filled, it also updated the database of product on hand, and would either send a bill if needed or update the accounts if money was sent with the invoice, tracking both in the appropriate places in the account database. Our job was bug squashing and developing and modifying features as needed. This where I came in, as this was part of my job. It was a pretty flexible software package, capable of handling a lot more than it was being used for and modifiable to do almost anything. And then there was the downside, as the whole thing was running on an interpreted, compile at runtime version of BASIC. Anyone remember the BASIC that came with MS-DOS back in the day? Yeah, pretty much that, just a bit more sophisticated. In itself, not a bad thing as the language was very clear, and thus easy to understand and implement changes, and the included IDE was actually fairly decent. And that was about the last good thing about the setup. While the original state was well documented, the system we were dealing with had undergone 5 years worth of mostly undocumented changes, and pretty much all of that was spaghetti code that was barely commented by the time I got to it. Oh, and the company that had created it had either discontinued it or gone under in the meantime. Guess how much fun it was working on that codebase. Now, digital ordering was just becoming a thing and the company wanted in. The idea was one of their major clients would call in via modem, drop a file off, and the software would automatically turn it into an invoice instead of them calling or mailing an invoice to be entered manually. Surprisingly, the software suite was already set up to handle that, but since the client used another software suite, I had to manage an interpreter capable of reading their format and spitting out ours. In theory simple, in practice a nightmare. The invoice file format had been modified, the changes, of course, undocumented. Worse, while it was easy to append new data to an existing invoice, it couldn't track what had already been read from the file it was translating, pointers didn't exist. So, you'd write an entry into the new invoice, and then have to figure out where you left off. It turned what should have been a few hours worth of work into a 3-day project. Still, I got it done and was quite proud of the result. Of course, not being an idiot, I set it up in our test environment first and shadowed production for a week. I'd process the file electronically, production would do so manually, and I'd compare outputs. 5 days worth of matching outputs, I committed it to production, and all was good. Or so I thought. A few months pass and the company calls in a panic. They have way too much inventory on hand and physical counts aren't lining up with the inventory database. And since my changes were the last made, something in my code had broken things spectacularly. I spent 20 hours, consecutively, in emergency mode trying to track things down. The problem was perplexing. The program ran flawlessly in test, but the production version would occasionally tell the workflow to make one more product that was actually needed, even though the invoice was correct. And since shipping pulled product from the invoice, that extra bit of product would just sit. And since the software updated the inventory based off the invoice, no one noticed that there was more product than there should have been until the semi-annual inventory count caught the, by then, huge discrepancies. Now, this should have been impossible. Test was supposedly updated in lockstep with production, and should have been an exact mirror. However, it wasn't, and running a diff between the two finally coughed it up. When a manually entered invoice updated the workflow server on what needed, made the production version included a few extra lines of code in a file not present in test. When examined closer, it turned out to be an error trap designed specifically to catch and correct a flaw in the system. Now, you may wonder, if the error trap was missing on the test version, why did it still spit out flawless results? At first I thought it could be the worst case of coincidence imaginable, the flaw being intermittent and simply not triggering in the week of testing. So I ran literally hundreds of electronic orders through the thing, no errors. Cue hair-pulling frustration. There was no reason I should have missed this. There was no reason why the flaw should exist in production, but not test, as they were running the same version of the software. Weren't they? Out of curiosity, I pulled up the version files. Production was running xxxx, xx.m, and test was running xxxx.xx.n of the software. Guess what small change was made in between m and n? Yeah, way in the back of the documentation it was noted the N was a hot patch created specifically to fix this flaw in one of the libraries. So, how did this happen when production and test were supposedly just copies? Well, as it turns out, you couldn't just copy the software over. Oh, the files and databases were fine, but the runtime compiler and libraries were bound to a specific computer via a licensing file. New computer would need a new license as the file would check hardware on run, and if it didn't match, well. So, at some point, well before I got there, the test environment was moved to a new computer, and relicensed, and thus got the newest version. And since upgrading the production version would have been a huge hassle for literally a single change, they left it at M and just added the error trap to fix it that way. Of course, they did so after copying everything over to test, because test didn't need the fix. And this was never documented anywhere. And never caught because, since test and production started identical, it was simply easier to only move the few files that were changed versus the hundreds of megabytes of the entire thing. And it shouldn't have mattered, the error trap was a separate file specifically so it would never be overwritten by changes propagated from test. The problem was it was set up to field incoming manual invoices, and missed invoices automatically generated as they were separate and distinct processes. It would have been a simple fix to correct, just no one knew it was there as the programmer who implemented was long gone and left no documentation. I immediately corrected it, but it was too late. They had a ton of money tied up in product they didn't know they had, and thus thousands of dollars of difference between their accounting database and reality. How no one caught that last one earlier, I still don't know. But it was enough to throw the company into disarray and, when an economic slowdown hit shortly thereafter, into bankruptcy. All because I missed a few lines in a file. While my boss was obviously not pleased, I didn't take the blame. I had followed procedure, my changes were well documented, and had passed testing flawlessly.